What's going on, guys? Now, first, I want to preface this in saying that I'm not throwing any disrespect to anybody. In fact, everything I'm about to say in this video can be thrown back at yours truly. Although I will say that the topic I'm getting into today is something that is in the back of my head and is something I'm very mindful about in the content I do produce for you. But the topic of this video is why, for some of you, I'm not saying always or all the time, should possibly consider not listening to many of the influencers out there in social media, especially going into 2025. When it comes to the realm of, let's say, biohacking, fitness, health, diet, bodybuilding, and even some of the content I'm talking about here, reviewing fitness equipment. And of course, these are some of my opinions. Definitely throw your comments down below, and this is somewhat subjective, but I think we'd all agree to some extent objectively the business of influencing or influencers is and has been a very real thing since the dawn of time. There's a very good reason why a lot of money is pumped into just influencing, marketing, etc., to help you guys buy things or to sell a particular idea or concept. And don't get me wrong, there is a legit reason to consume this type of content, learn a few things from other people otherwise would not get exposed to, and there is definitely a service I think they are providing. And to give a benefit of the doubt to everybody, I do think everyone who is producing content as regular as this machine requires of us is doing so out of a place of genuine care of improving the lives of those around them. But I do think there is a growing concern, and I'd say possibly, to get a little dramatic here, epidemic of sorts with this type of content that is continually being pressed out on a daily, continual basis, not just hour by hour, but minute by minute in some of the ways people are digesting social media. But I definitely noticed throughout the years, I'm sure you guys have as well, this realm of fitness and diet has only further exploded. What otherwise was a very niche demographic of individuals, especially even on the internet, has now exploded to the mainstream, where at first, at the time, especially when I was growing up, supplements, diet books, diet fads or fad diets, even bodybuilding and fitness culture was really a very minute demographic. And if you were exposed to some content, it was very basic information. Of course, there was marketing and modern day influencers and magazines and stuff like that, of course. But now you start to see this vicious cycle kind of repeat itself, and you start to see maybe the mistakes that I know I made personally and continue to kind of make its way to really almost every facet of society. And on the surface, and to play a little bit devil's advocate here, I'm not saying all this is of course bad. I think in large part you could argue this is a good thing, that people are getting more wise and more educated to their health, and at least being mindful about it. However, with everything, I do think there is a cause and effect here. There's positives and negatives to this influx of health information that we have. And I do think this other side is not discussed enough, or some people are just oblivious to it, or worse yet, it's possibly being ignored and then also exploited to some people for profit. And so what I'm really talking about here is when fitness or health behaviors really get to the realm of obsessive compulsive behavior, or really get into like this negative downward spiral. And if you listen closely to the channel, this is a theme I've presented many times. Actually, professionally, I presented this and looked into this to a deeper degree, especially many years ago. But what jogged this to my memory to make this particular video was an article I saw published just before, I think, New Year's Eve or prior to the new year, about the term orthorexia, which was first presented by Dr. Stephen Bratman. And it basically is describing this term he coined, which is an unhealthy obsession with healthy eating. And not just healthy eating, but it relates to just all sorts of lifestyle factors with fitness and supplementation. And his story is actually very interesting. I've plugged his book a lot. I actually was looking for my book. I think it's actually in my office. It's not in my house. Health Food Junkies, you can get it really cheap. The book is very fascinating, but even Dr. Stephen Bratman's story is very fascinating. He was a physician. He tried to treat his patients holistically using diet, supplementation, exercise. He was really into this stuff, I say ahead of the time. He tried to avoid things like drugs until one day, I believe this is part of the main story that changed his mind. He met a patient who had terrible kind of physiological issues like her hair issues, skin issues, bloating, a lot of the common things we see people seek health and fitness turnarounds to kind of change and alter, and they definitely do. But with this patient, time went on, and he actually saw her later on as like a follow-up, I believe, and she looked completely different. She said she felt so much better, and of course he asked, well, what did you do differently? And she said, I totally ignored all the advice you told me to do, and I went on this beer and pizza diet, which obviously we'd say is not objectively the healthiest thing in the world. And even then at that point, he started thinking, well, is there something, maybe a nutrient or some sort of diet change that helped correct this, or just something in the beer and pizza or something? And he really realized that he was going on himself this downward spiral of looking for issues that were not really there and putting all these physiological issues, a lot of them were also psychosomatic and mental, which we do know can manifest physiologically, into the realm of diet, nutrition, and fitness. And he realized that yes, you can actually work yourself up sick, which I think all of us can relate, that's a real thing, of creating anxiety and angst and just an obsession over finding the ideal path. And when you look closely at this realm of orthorexia and this kind of downward spiral, which I myself, I would say, admittedly went into, and I don't think I really thought of it as a bad thing. It was part of my hobby, it was part of my career my whole life. of examining and looking into these things, what they find are some interesting correlations that we don't necessarily know if it's the chicken or the egg, because a lot of people who are seeking health and fitness advice, who are actually seeking, say, a personal trainer, odds are they're the ones who are most susceptible to this, and also those who actually go into the health professions, even specifically and ironically, registered dietitians suffer from this the most. And so we can kind of theorize that, is it the knowledge of incoming knowledge of learning about health, physical fitness, that causes you to really overthink what you're actually doing when it comes to really doing the quote unquote right thing with this abundance of information, versus someone who knows absolutely nothing or knows very simple information and doesn't spend as much or exude as much mental energy and stress or even financial resources towards going down the ideal ultimate path to fulfillment and enlightenment, so to speak. And I think this is where a lot of influencers, either knowingly or unknowingly, I think most of them realize this can definitely be a thing and they've probably gone down this path enough. But I think many times they have to put out continual content, so I don't know if they're really doing it intentionally, so to speak, but oftentimes I hear people like Dr. I forget his first name, Andrew Huberman, or Peter Attia, or even like Joe Rogan. People talk about that. In fact, yesterday I had somebody tell me they went out and bought NeuroGum, and I said, why'd you buy that? I don't know if there's anything wrong with it, but he said, well, because I heard it on Joe Rogan, and they kind of laughed that they just literally bought it because they know it was just like an influential buy. And I hear this all the time from clients, and the issue kind of really comes in. I honestly find this with most people more than ever, not to be hypocritical, I think I do this myself, where when you start talking about basic health and fitness advice, they'll want to know like a basic program, very good common questions, but when you go through kind of their schedule in a day, I'm kind of amazed at all the information they're taking in and trying to apply all at once. So I've literally had clients who have a very physical, demanding job, sometimes taking care of other loved ones, and they wake up at like 3:30, 4 in the morning to do this health ritual of jumping in a cold plunge, then going to red light, then going into, of course, their workouts, stretching, cool downs, all sorts of things, not to mention meal prepping and supplementation, which is also usually 2 pages long. All this stuff I'm not against. In fact, I do think there's a lot of great things at having a schedule and discipline, but again, they lose the forest for the trees of why they actually specifically say we're talking to me or hiring me for fitness advice. And I'm saying, like, all this extra stuff you're doing, I don't know if you really think about how necessary it is, one, to your goal, but also how much different are you to the person down the street who is not doing all these things. And I'm not saying it's always a open and shut case of one's good and one's bad, but I just let them realize the fact that they start jumping from diet to diet, fad to fad, and they add all these things, that you can't possibly be consistent and really keep up with these things to actually see which variable is really working. And again, I think many of these influencers, oftentimes for the sake of content, just because they don't want to say they're wrong and it's not really the best information to put forward, are only really showing the good side of the story. They're never really showing the negative attributes. So a topic I've hit on many times, I really encourage these myself personally, encourage things like just natural training, natural bodybuilding, even you say supplementation, whatever. And the big popular thing is TRT. And I hear so many people that jump on this bandwagon because that is the missing link, they think, psychologically or physically, it's going to cure everything. And you could apply the TRT thing to like literally everything, whether it's carbohydrates, meat, a vegan diet, whatever. I've heard all sorts of things running the gamut, which I'm not saying are not possibly true. Obviously check with your medical practitioner, etc. But when it comes to TRT and HRT, stuff like that, you hear how awesome it is and you don't hear those negative stories. And there are plenty out there. There are many influencers who have come across full circle and said, I have been wrong. That was something that actually did not make my life better. As much as it did improve me physically, to stay on this kind of physical theme here, it actually made their life worse. I'm thinking of, like, let's say Elliot Hulse has openly talked about that. If you guys know who he is, check him out. He's been a long time YouTuber. Another old school person, I think it's ironic, these are the old school people who've been doing this for a while who are kind of coming out and saying this. I saw this literally the other day for research for another video. Vince, I think his name is Del Monte, forgive me, but I remember seeing him years ago, like over 10 years ago. He was one of the original fitness YouTubers. He made a series of videos talking about why he regrets being on TRT for 10 years and how much damage he thought it really did to his life. So again, I'm not saying these people are bad or putting out bad information. You should just stop listening to them completely. I'm just saying take these things in stride, apply these things kind of one at a time. And again, I'm sure you guys could say I'm being hypocritical. I literally just subscribed and shameless plug MacroFactor. I think it's the best diet logging app. I got into that, but I've gone down the negative rabbit hole of diet logging and being obsessed with calories. What I like about MacroFactor is not a plug, it just popped in my head. I like that one because it takes these things into consideration. You don't have to be specific and exact, and it'll make little adjustments as you kind of go along. There's not this kind of pressure with it. So there's a shameless plug if you want to check that out, 2 free weeks free. And I think we all know deep down, going back many years, the old tried and true stuff works. When you talk about just sustainable dietary choices, good practical programming principles that are consistent, and I'll just say it, basic common sense lifestyle factors like getting enough sleep, trying to really avoid trigger eating foods, whatever, trying to find some good happiness throughout your life, trying to lower stress levels. This goes to everything. Just there's so much information out there. I just think we all need to check ourselves. And I'd say also maybe in a side point, last point, be careful how much social media you're really digesting. I know I can personally handle so much because of these things. It can get me stressed out. And I just think for this new year, hopefully you guys take one little change at a time, because I think all those things I just mentioned are probably the most important things, biggest bang for your buck, and everything else might be kind of minor tweaks in the chain there. Hopefully this information was helpful, guys. Really just doing this because personal experience. I've gone down this road myself. Hopefully you guys have a great start to 2025. I'll see you on the next video.